Some people arrive in this world carrying a quiet secret, something unspoken that follows them like a shadow. You see it in their eyes, in the way they pause before they speak, in the way they seem to feel everything more deeply than most. These are not ordinary souls. They are born standing too close to the veil. The thin line between what can be seen and what remains hidden. The world calls them sensitive. The world misunderstands them. They are not weak. They are not fragile. They are simply open in ways most people never dare to be. To them, life doesn't speak in loud commands. It whispers. A sudden silence, a shift in the wind, the hesitation in someone's voice. These things hold meaning. Where others see surface, they feel depth. Where others walk by, they stop and absorb. They're tuned in, not just to what's being said, but to everything unsaid. And that, in a world obsessed with noise and speed, becomes both their gift and their cross to bear. They carry emotions like sacred fire, not just their own, but yours and mine, and the echoes of those long gone. They can feel the weight in a room before anyone speaks. They take on sorrow that doesn't belong to them. They ache without knowing why. It's not because they're broken, it's because they're built to feel. They don't just live in the world lives inside them. But this kind of openness comes at a price. When you are porous to the unseen, you don't only sense beauty, you sense the grief people hide behind smiles, the fear behind bravado, the rage buried beneath silence. You become a vessel, sometimes willingly, sometimes not. And eventually it begins to wear on you, not because you don't care, but because you care too much. Sleep becomes uneasy. Dreams are not dreams. They're messages. Images of animals, strangers, floods, fires, birth and death. These are not just symbols. They are visitors from the deeper realms of the psyche. Mythic, archetypal. They knock on the door of the mind, not to frighten, but to remind. There's more to life than what you can explain. There's more to you than what the world sees. And yet these souls are rarely understood. They're told to toughen up, to stop being so dramatic, to quit taking everything so personally. But what no one tells them is that their depth is rare and that without guidance, it can turn into a kind of drowning. Because when you don't know what's yours and what belongs to everyone else, you begin to believe that all of it is your fault, your weight, your sickness, your sadness. But it's not. Not always. Sometimes what you're feeling isn't yours at all. It's ancestral. It's collective. It's the silence that never got a voice. And if you don't learn to root yourself, to protect the borders of your soul, that ocean of feeling will pull you under. You'll think you're depressed when you're actually saturated. You'll think you're anxious when you're simply wide open. And the more you try to fix yourself, the more confused you'll feel. Because you were never broken to begin with. This path is not for the faint of heart. But if you are one of these people, you must know this. Your sensitivity is not a flaw. It's a compass. It will not always make sense. It will often hurt, but it is how the soul finds its way. You were not meant to shut down. You were meant to rise with full awareness of what you carry, not to be swallowed by it, but to learn how to swim. He walked in like a storm trying to hold itself together, just 24 years old, eyes hollow from years of sleepless nights, shoulders heavy with something no one else could see. He wasn't ill. He wasn't broken, but he believed he was. I can't function, he whispered. I cry at everything. Trees, music, the way someone looks at me. He had been told he was too sensitive, and he was ashamed of it, as if the softness inside him was something to fix. But when he dreamed, something deeper spoke. Angels offering soil instead of bread. Wolves tending to wounds that weren't his. A city crumbling while he stood untouched at its heart. His soul wasn't sick. It was wide open. No one had ever taught him how to hold what kept pouring in. This is the silent crisis of the sensitive. The ones who walk through life like open windows. They aren't meant to close off, but they are meant to understand. Sensitivity is not the enemy. It only becomes suffering when it remains unconscious. But when it is made conscious, it becomes vision. That is the turning point. The moment where a burden becomes a calling. You're not here to harden. You're not here to conform to a numb and hurried world. You are here to feel what others deny, to sense what's missing, to listen to what's been silenced for generations. But you cannot do it blindly. Without awareness, sensitivity will drown you. It will pull you into emotions that aren't yours, fears that don't belong to you, shadows that have never seen the light. Every truly sensitive soul reaches a threshold, a breaking point. The sadness begins to bleed into everything. The anxiety becomes constant background noise. The body starts to hold pain with no origin. This is not weakness. This is not failure. This is the moment before the transformation. The point where the soul has absorbed so much darkness, it can no longer hold anymore. And the only way forward is down. You will descend, not by choice, but by necessity. The dream world will grow louder. The coincidences will feel too precise. Everything familiar may begin to fall apart. This is the soul's cry for healing, not destruction, but be warned. This descent is not safe. Not everyone makes it through unchanged. Some run, some numb themselves to feel nothing, some pretend to be fine, but the rare few, the ones who have the courage to stay with it, begin the sacred unraveling. They don't fall into despair, they fall into depth. That is where the real work begins, the work of becoming whole. This is the ancient path of the mystic, hidden in plain sight. What used to be dismissed as fragility becomes sacred sensitivity, but only if you go all the way in. This descent isn't symbolic, it's real. You feel it in your bones, in your breath, in the dreams that won't let you rest. You'll see yourself climbing staircases that never end, falling into water, locked in rooms beneath the surface of waking life. Do not run from these images. They are not curses. They are keys. They are showing you what the world forgot. That healing doesn't come from avoidance. It comes from facing the thing no one else will face. And for the sensitive, that thing is everything. Not just your story, but the collective one. The grief passed down, the love never expressed, the fear buried deep beneath a culture obsessed with strength and performance. This is why you feel so much. This is why you cry when no one else does. Because your body is the echo chamber of the world's silence. And when that silence builds, it's you who begins to shake. But you cannot stay open without grounding. Without structure, your soul will drift. You'll lose yourself in other people's wounds. You'll forget what's yours and what never was. You must learn to root yourself in something deeper than emotion, in meaning, in self-awareness, in inner clarity. Only then can you carry what you came here to carry. You were not made to float endlessly in other people's pain. You were made to see it, feel it, and transform it. That is the gift. That is the cost. And that is the path. They often don't even realize it's happening. One day they just find themselves slipping into roles. The helper, the healer, the one who always understands. It feels noble. It feels purposeful. For a while, it even feels right. But underneath it all, something aches. These roles, no matter how kind or compassionate, are not the soul. They are masks, temporary shelters, a way to survive a world that doesn't know how to hold someone who feels so deeply. But the soul eventually grows restless beneath the mask, because what it longs for isn't applause or approval. It longs to be whole. And wholeness doesn't come from fixing others. It comes from remembering who you are, beneath all the noise and expectation. You see, the self is not the story you tell about yourself. It's not your personality or your trauma or your dreams. It is everything. It is the shadow and the light, the soft and the fierce, the wound and the wisdom, holding hands in the same breath. And for the sensitive soul, this return to self isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. I remember a woman who came to me with a dream that haunted her. She was at a dinner party when the ground cracked open and swallowed her whole. No one noticed. She fell into a dark, womb-like space where a silent figure began to draw strange symbols across her skin. She woke in tears, frightened and confused. But I told her, you weren't being buried. You were being reborn. The unconscious doesn't waste time with comfort. It goes straight to the truth. That figure painting her was not a stranger. It was the deeper self, pulling her away from the surface life, reclaiming her from the performance. Sensitivity had brought her to the threshold. Now something older, wiser, was asking her to cross it. You see, the path of the sensitive is not about escaping the world. It's about entering it fully, but from the center of your own soul. That begins with boundaries, not just physical, but energetic. Without them, you absorb everything. With them, you begin to perceive clearly. The difference is profound. Without boundaries, you're a sponge. With them, you become a mirror, a seer, a channel. You are not here to carry people. You are here to witness them, not to fix, but to reflect. That requires discernment. That requires discipline. You must ask yourself again and again, is this feeling mine, or did I pick it up from the room? Is this fear mine, or am I echoing someone else's silence? The answers often come, not in words, but in symbols. The dream will guide you. If you're giving too much, you might dream of leaking vessels or overflowing rooms. If you're being invaded psychically, strangers will appear in your home, doors left unlocked, wild animals staring through your windows. These are not coincidences. They are instructions from your own unconscious. They are reminders that your soul is always trying to speak, even when the world isn't listening. Honor these images. Write them down. Speak them aloud. Let them live. Over time, they will begin to shift. Where you once dreamed of floods, you'll see rivers flowing in a direction. Where you once saw bleeding wounds, you'll see scars. Where there were faceless shadows, guides will begin to emerge. Because the unconscious responds to relationship. The more you engage with it, the more it trusts you, the more it reveals. And this, more than anything, changes the way you move through life. The world doesn't become easier, but you do. You start to recognize when a storm of emotion isn't yours. You stop defaulting to absorption. You begin to choose your presence instead of being pulled into every feeling that brushes past your skin. Your intuition sharpens. Your body becomes your compass, your dreams, your teachers, and something beautiful begins to grow inside you. A stillness, a center, not imagined, but real. That is the self. And from that place, your sensitivity becomes a gift of precision. You're no longer flinching at every ripple. You're discerning, responding only to what is true. And that changes everything. Because in a world that's half asleep to its own inner life, you are awake, not to suffer, but to see, not to drown, but to guide, not to carry the pain, but to reflect it back as only a mirror can. A mirror can only reflect clearly once it has turned inward, once it has faced its own distortions, its own shadows. And you who have walked through descent, who have set boundaries not as walls but as sacred thresholds, you're now standing at the edge of something ancient. Initiation. This is not something given. It's not something declared. It is something lived. The unconscious begins to shift when it realizes you are no longer running. It stops chasing you with symbols of collapse. It no longer has to scream to be heard. Instead, it begins to speak with a quiet authority. Symbols become richer, dreams become gentler. Not because the world has softened, but because you have grown strong enough to meet it without breaking. What once terrified you now intrigues you. What once overwhelmed now opens. Everything starts to carry meaning. The way someone looks at you, a bird crossing your path, a conversation that leaves you breathless. These aren't just moments, they are messages. You start to feel like you're living in a myth, not reading one. And that's because you are. We all are. But the sensitive soul, if awakened, begins to see the myth they're already living. This isn't poetic language, it's truth. The soul doesn't exist outside of myth. It breathes it. We are born into stories larger than us. Some of us just feel the pressure of them more clearly. That's why you've always felt like you didn't quite belong, because a part of you was born knowing what most people forget, that life is not just a sequence of events, it's a symbolic journey, and every sorrow, every joy, every loss and reunion is part of something deeply archetypal, something eternal. When that realization lands in your body, your sensitivity transforms. You stop asking, why do I feel this way? And begin to ask, what is being shown to me? You no longer drown in emotion, you interpret it. You learn to track the pulse of the invisible. Your nervous system stops being a liability and becomes your guide. You don't just feel, you know, But just when you think you've arrived, a deeper challenge emerges, one that does not scream, but hums low in the bones. It is the archetype of the wounded seer, the one who sees too much and cannot look away, the one who walks through the world carrying truths that others are not ready to bear. This is the cross that many empaths and sensitives must carry. Not the weight of their own feelings, but the burden of knowing what others cannot yet accept. To bear witness, truly witness, is not easy. It means standing in rooms and sensing the grief no one talks about. It means hearing the lies beneath words, feeling the history pulsing beneath a stranger's story. It means dreaming of futures not yet born and walking with ghosts who never got to speak. And still, you must not shut down. You must not harden. The task is to see clearly without losing yourself in what you see, and something begins to shift again. The dream no longer haunts, it guides. You start meeting figures in the psyche who don't chase but walk beside you. Elders, guides, animals that don't bite but lead. The dark forest becomes familiar. The cave becomes a womb, not a tomb. The flood that once threatened to drown you becomes a baptism. These are not just symbols, they are affirmations. The unconscious no longer sees you as prey. It sees you as partner. You are no longer just sensitive. You are being initiated into mysticism, into deep inner leadership. But with this gift comes a quiet ache, the paradox of awakening. The closer you come to your true self, the more alone you may feel, because much of the world is still asleep. People still project, still numb, still run from the silence you've learned to sit with. Do not harden your heart. Do not resent them. They are not separate from you. They are you at a different time, wearing a different mask, walking a different chapter of the story. And one day, maybe they too will awaken. And when they do, they'll need someone like you, not to save them, but to remind them that the descent is survivable. The silence is holy, and the gift was never the sensitivity itself, but the soul you uncovered through it. You don't have to convince anyone. You were never meant to. That was never the task. Your work is to embody, to live so honestly, so presently, with such unwavering integrity that your presence alone becomes a kind of mirror, one that reflects not opinion, but essence. And when others stand near you, they won't see who you are trying to be. They will see a clearer glimpse of themselves. This is the quiet power of the awakened sensitive. Not to preach, not to persuade, but to re-enchant the world simply by being, by moving through life in such alignment that even silence feels sacred. Your dream is your scripture, your body, the living temple, your stillness, the prayer, and your pain, it is the fire, the sacred, relentless fire through which the scattered parts of you have been melted and reforged into something whole. Most don't survive this unchanged. But if you do, if you've walked through the inner wilderness and returned, you do not come back as you were. You come back as who you truly are. And that changes everything. Because in reclaiming your soul, you help the world remember it still has one. But the most delicate part of the journey is not the descent, it's the return. It's bringing the soul back to the surface without losing its depth. Because the world will pull on you. It will ask you to forget, to simplify, to shrink. It will reward persona, not presence. It will tempt you to explain away your sacred knowing with words too small for what you now carry. But once the soul has awakened, it cannot pretend to sleep. You can't unknow what you know. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't go back to surviving because now you are called to live. Not just live, but live awake. And here comes the final warning. Not loud, not dramatic, but quiet. So quiet only those who've truly listened will hear it. Your sensitivity is no longer about you. It is now the doorway, the instrument through which the self meets the world. Not to fix it, not to flee it, but to witness it. You've become a carrier of symbols, a bearer of meaning, a living thread between what's visible and what's hidden. And yes, the old world will still ask for you to explain yourself. It will want you to be quick, efficient, easy to define, but you are none of those things anymore. You are complex, deep, vast, because now you carry the entire arc of the human experience within you. Not just the polished parts, but the raw, the ancient, the exiled. The very things the world avoids are what you now walk with, effortlessly. The wound that once silenced you has become a threshold. The dreams that once haunted you have become your compass. And the fire that once burned through your life now lights the way forward. You may still shake. You may still doubt. But now your trembling holds power. It is not weakness, it is presence. And that is how you serve. Not by fixing every broken thing or sacrificing yourself for others. You serve by staying anchored in your own myth, rooted in your own knowing, aligned with your soul's truth. Because a sensitive being who has walked through their own darkness and emerged luminous is a quiet threat to everything false. They cannot be bought. They cannot be deceived. They cannot be made small again. Their silence unsettles. Their gaze reveals. Their very life becomes a message, not because they are trying to teach, but because they have become the teaching. This is not ego. This is not fantasy. This is the quiet mystery of the incarnated self, the self that remembers where it came from, the self that exists beyond performance, the self that draws strength from sensitivity, clarity from chaos, vision from sorrow. And if you're that soul, if you have walked through the fire and still found the courage to feel, then hear this. You have already become what the world so desperately needs. You are not what they once called you. Not fragile, not too sensitive, not broken. You are wild in the truest sense, untamed by a world that asked you to shrink. You no longer flinch. You feel, but you do not drown. You respond, but you are no longer pulled under. You are no longer walking around in pieces trying to make sense of your pain. You are whole, and in that wholeness, there is room for the world, not to carry on your back, but to witness with open eyes. That is enough. That has always been enough. And now you don't return to masks or roles or polished words. You walk forward, present, unhidden, clear. Let your dreams keep speaking in their strange, beautiful language. Let your body remain your compass. Let your stillness carry weight in a room where everyone's still shouting. Let your soul, old, radiant, undiminished, stand quietly as proof that feeling deeply was never the problem. It was the way through. For every person still afraid of their own depth, for every soul told they were too much. You are the living reminder. You are not too much. You are exactly what the world forgot it was missing. A mirror for what is real. A myth still unfolding. A medicine for a world addicted to its numbness. And now, you are free.